Now, one thing you'll also find mentioned in the PEPs is how you comment your code. And that is something we didn't have a look at yet. You can create comments in Python by using the hash symbol. Like here, we could say initializing our blockchain list. Comments should be used to improve the readability of your code. But one core principle of Python also is that your code should be readable on its own. So you should have clear function and variable names, and your code actually shouldn't need too many comments. I'll still add quite a lot of comments, also outside of these videos, for the code which you can download, so that it's easier to understand for you. But in general, not many comments should be required. This, however, is one way of commenting. A common technique also is to sometimes comment out a certain value, like this, if you just want to test something without that being defined. Now here this doesn't make sense, but you'll see this occasionally throughout the course. There also is another way of commenting it, and that are so-called docstrings. These are essentially the multi-line strings you learned about, with the 3 quotation marks. You use them, for example, at the beginning of own functions, like this, 3 opening and 3 closing quotation marks. And in between, you comment your function, like returns the last value of the current blockchain. The cool thing here is most IDEs actually pick this up. Now, by default, this would be a normal Python string. It's not an official comment, but it also doesn't do any damage to your code. It kind of emerged, or it simply is the case now, that we use this syntax to comment our own files or our own functions. So we can use this and add this to a function. And now when we call getLastBlockchainValue, or if we use this in the IDE, we actually get support. As you can see, if I hover over this, here you see the text which I entered above. So that's very handy, especially if you're writing code that is shared with other developers. And it is a good practice to comment your own functions. Like here, append a new value as well as the last blockchain value to the blockchain. And docstrings are typically also written in a way that you have a first summary sentence, and if it's on a function like here, you then also should add something like arguments, and the exact style is up to you. I'll use this style arguments, then I'll use a colon, but this again is really up to you, and the name of an argument like transaction amount, and then a short information about that argument. The amount that should be added, and we got a second argument, last transaction, the last blockchain transaction. We can also add default 1. Now the advantage of this clearly is that whenever we use add value, we get that information. And if we're not the creator of that function, this of course is very helpful when it comes to us understanding that syntax. And this is also why we get highlighting, for example, for input. Here we also get some help in the IDE, well, because input is implemented like this and because it also has a docstring. Now let's therefore complete our commenting exercise here by also adding something to get user input, returns the input of the user, a new transaction amount, as a float. Try to be as precise as possible so that if our developers were to use your code, they can understand what's happening. So these are comments added for general readability and to help our developers, as well as docstrings also added to help our developers, but also as a general good practice to make your code easier to understand and read.